Welcome to the show. This week, we have a very special guest, Matt Wilkins, the American PI, Paul Jaeb. Paul, the former owner of Heartland Investigations in Minnesota, checks in to talk about business strategies post-COVID-19. Now, Paul has an excellent blog available on this matter and is hosting a free webinar this Wednesday, June 17th at 10 a.m. Central Time. Register at AmericanPrivateInvestigator.com. Info will be in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by Crosstracks Case Management Software. Crosstracks now offers CTX Vision, a fully integrated video conferencing platform built into Crosstracks. The videos you host go directly into your video tab. Crosstracks also integrates with programs you already use like QuickBooks, DelvePoint, Scope Now, Investigation Video Editor, Word, and more. The integrations combined with powerful features such as an automated audio transcription and report generation help investigators generate revenue and improve efficiency. The system can be customized for any investigative specialty. Start your free trial today at crosstracks.co and use promo code PIP20. Check out the latest issue of PI Magazine at pimagazine.com, available online or by print. Look for Matt's columns on Podcasting 101 and his take on the investigative industry's trends. And now the Heartland meets the city that never sleeps. Please welcome Paul Jaeb and our host, private investigator Matt Spare.
And welcome everybody to the next episode of PI Perspectives. This is your host, Matt Spare. So today we have a special episode, one I'm really looking forward to because it was in the works since about September of last year. I was out in Michigan at a conference and I met Paul Jaeb, and Paul had given a great presentation with regards to like managing your business and really trying to understand retirement and having the goal of making your business the most valuable it could possibly be at the time you're ready to tap out. One reason or another, we weren't able to actually get together until now, but now we are able to get together, and I asked Paul to come on to talk about what he's been up to and what he's doing. So, Paul, I want to welcome you to the program. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks a lot, Matt. I'm excited to be here.
Right. So you at one point had owned Heartland Investigative Group. That was started in 1991, I believe, right?
That's right, yep.
So tell me a little bit about how you got into the business and what your background is.
Yeah, I got into this in a kind of an odd way. I didn't have any real designs on getting into this business, but one day I went to visit my mother. I had just gotten out of college, and she was on the phone. So I was sitting there reading the paper and going through the sports page, the Metro page. Finally, I'm in the want ads, and this ad jumps off the page for investigators, and it was for Equifax, the huge credit bureau. They had a large division called Equifax Services, where they did lots of background investigations, surveillance, public record retrieval. It was kind of a cool job, right out of college. I stayed there for 2 or 3 years and then got licensed in September of 1991.
Right, and you built that business up. You built it with your brother, is that correct?
Yeah, a couple of years in, probably 2 or 3 years in, my younger brother, Tom, joined us. And then for the next, 22 years after that, we very cautiously but steadily built the agency. Finally, as part of our plan, sold it to a much bigger player in 2015.
And you had about 100 employees at that time, right?
Yeah, we had just under 100 employees and largely based here in the Midwest. We at times had offices in Denver, Jacksonville, but at the end of the day, we kind of pulled everything back.
Right.
And decided to grow it, just dominate our own backyard.
Right. So what type of clientele did you service? Was it insurance, attorneys? What was the balance?
Yeah, we did very little insurance work. It was only in our later years where we started to poach some really good surveillance guys. But the core part of our business was attorneys, corporate attorneys, a little bit of criminal defense, but a tremendous amount of work for private equity, hedge funds, bankers, doing a lot of enhanced due diligence. And that's kind of where we made our name in that weird little niche. Really profitable work, relatively easy to assemble once you kind of figure it out.
Right.
So that was kind of our bread and butter, so to speak.
Right. So how did you start coming up with this concept or this passion of wanting to coach other investigators or just pass this knowledge along? Because that is something that you were very passionate about. And, you have a lot of nuggets that you've offered along the way to different people. So what led you to go down that path?
Back in 2009, Matt, I started to do a podcast called The American Private Investigator. And the intent was not to talk so much about the hard skills that investigators have or need, like how to shoot better video or how to interview minors and that kind of stuff. Instead, we decided to kind of focus it on how to run a better agency. So that was kind of the focus. It was strictly as a give back. At that point, I was still growing Heartland at the time and just didn't have the capacity to work with a lot of PIs. But after I sold my agency, sitting on the sidelines for a while, decided, I really like working with small business owners, and what better business to do it in one that I built from nothing, to a $6 million, 100-person agency. And so I started to onboard clients and probably have worked with, a dozen, 24 private investigators, just helping them build a better agency that is reflective of what they really want.
Yeah, we're going to dig more into that in a little bit. So tell me more about the podcast, because that's how I actually first learned about you. Mm-hmm. Was looking for content out there that I felt like it would be good to invest my time in. I felt like the format that you had and the guests that you had. Who doesn't love Alan Goodman? That guy's amazing. Yeah. And I finally got to use Alan on a job. I was so happy about that. I was like, it's like me talking to a rock star, man. I'm like listening to you forever. Hey, I need a plate up in Maine. Can you help me for the DMV plate? And we ended talking about cooking because we both like to cook, so it was cool. So, just the concept. And I like to feel like that my format of the show that I have, I borrowed a lot from the structure and the way that you build things. But the difference is I wanted to focus more on the how to do certain things or introduce people that could help other investigators do. So, but that same kind of spirit of, hey, we're going to talk about, here's somebody who does something, who's grown their business and is successful, learn from it, right? And to me, those are the podcasts I want to listen to. It's nice to hear about how a crime was solved or any of that. That serves its purpose as well. But for me, if I'm investing time in something, I want to be able to get something from it. So, I definitely, I was inspired by what you did. And a lot of what I'm doing now is based upon those shows. I really enjoyed listening to them.
Well, the reason, Matt, that we kind of went down that path was I had become pretty heavily involved in the industry from a young age. I had co-founded the Minnesota Association of Private Investigators. I served on the National Association of Legal Investigators Executive Council for probably a decade, started a federal PAC. So I had the opportunity to meet hundreds and hundreds of PIs, and I'd speak at conferences. So I really got around, and what kind of dawned on me was, I think as a profession, we are so good at doing the actual work. And I love hearing about these successes that people have, cracking cases and, being part of big criminal defense teams and all that. But what I found really lacking was, any sort of business training. So many people come to our profession as a second career where they maybe just didn't have just didn't learn those skills of how to build an agency. And as I progressed through my career, I liked owning and running an agency better than doing the investigative stuff.
It's a tough balance, man. Yeah, making that transition is really difficult. I struggle with it because I do love doing the investigative work, but I really love being an owner as well. And the passion for growing my business is there. Like I really love doing that. I love managing people. But every now and then I like to get out there. And then the problem you have also is your clients want you out there too, right? I hired Matt Spare to do this. I didn't hire, Matt's assistant, the apprentice, right? I want his 20-something years of experience. So that's always a struggle also.
Yeah, great point, because that really is one of the big struggles. And the value of an agency cannot be the principal owner, because then you can't really sell it, or you're severely discounted. Because if someone buys, Matt Spare and Associates, and there's no Matt Spare left, they don't feel like they've got anything. So I had to make a really hard choice. And I had a lot of help over the years. I was in a lot of peer groups. I hired consultants, and I made a hard break. This is it. I'm no longer sticking my head into cases unless it was really up my alley.
Right.
So, I might have billed, 10, 20, 30 grand a year for the last 15 years, that I ran the agency. And
yeah. And the key is having good people, right? That's the other thing, right? Being willing to invest in your investigators, right? So, a good investigator, somebody that you can trust, that they know they're going to grasp onto the things that you teach them to do. Like, they have a passion to do the work. They're not just mailing it in. Those people are very valuable, very valuable. I could not make the transition that I made without having a great staff behind me. And I do. I love the people that work for me. They really have a good passion for what they're doing, and they're trainable, which is really important too.
Yeah. And, look, there are pockets of our business where it is really hard to do that. So if you're a really, really good criminal defense investigator, yeah, your clients want you, and that really, really matters. But there's very few clients that insisted that Paul Jaeb does their background check. That could be done by a junior person, and no one knew the better. So I do understand that for some, it's very difficult. But that's not to say that you can't succeed. Right. But you just have to learn how to maximize the heck out of that, and then build out around you other work for, the more entry level or junior investigators. And that's where I think there's just a huge breakdown. Yeah.
I remember that little nugget of not naming your agency after yourself. That was something you had talked about out in Michigan. So you just reminded me. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That's why it's not Matt Spare Investigations. It's never about me anyways, right? It's about the case. So I'm okay about that. So this is a good point to jump out. We're going to check in with our sponsors real quick. And then when we get back, I want to hear about this new initiative, this new thing that you're doing. You have an article available for people to download from your website. I've read the article already. It's awesome. It's very timely, right? It's dealing with a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. So we're going to jump out real quick, and we'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Scope Now. Have you tried Scope Now 3.0 yet? Scope Now offers a state-of-the-art platform with the power and speed of automated intelligence. Unlock the potential of your investigative resources. Visit scopenow.com for more details. Use code PIP20 to receive additional benefits. Are you ready for the future of networking and learning for private investigators? Imagine an online community with a vast amount of training and resource material. What if we told you some of the best content and technology providers will give you discounts and benefits for signing up? Well, get ready for the investigators-toolbox.com. Coming online this month. Learn more at investigators-toolbox.com.
And welcome back, everybody, to PI Perspectives. This is your host, Matt Spare. We are joined today by the American PI, Paul Jaeb. Paul, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, so when we left off, before we stepped off with the sponsors, we were talking about, or just about ready to talk about, this new initiative. So tell me, what have you been up to, and what are you looking to do these days?
Well, Matt, as you know, I did the podcast, I think, through 2015 or 2016, and then just kind of quietly worked with a lot of private investigators over the next 2-3 years. Then I decided I need to amp this back up and get back out there, largely because of the situation that so many PIs are finding themselves in right now with the pandemic. Such a absolute and complete, utter shock to, all business owners, but PIs, hit really, really hard. And over the course of, late February, March, I started getting a lot of phone calls and made a lot of phone calls to try to get my handle on, what's going on out there. And, having been a PI for the better part of 30 years now, I've been through quite a few of these crises. The day that I got licensed in 1991, I came back to my apartment and the Iraq war had started,
wow.
which was disruptive. No one knew what was going on. We're at war. We haven't been at war for a long time. That was disruptive. The savings and loan crisis was just getting cleaned up. Then there was the dot-com bubble, 9/11, the Great Recession. And as I started to kind of reflect on things, I thought, all those things happened and somehow we survived. I really don't recall, except for maybe the week of 9/11, ever being really, really upset because we had the discipline internally to pivot if we had to. And our product line was diverse enough, and we had great relationships with our clients, and we kind of got through it. So we kind of rebranded the American Private Investigator. We've got a new website, and we're going to be offering quite a bit of content out to the community. And the first thing that we published was the Hard Times Survival Guide for Private Investigators.
Right.
And that's been out now for probably 3 weeks. We've been pushing it out pretty hard. We've had, oh my God, hundreds and hundreds of downloads of it. So it's telling me that there's real anxiety out there.
Yeah. Listen, I've seen your marketing on social media, which is great. So whatever you're doing with your secret sauce with Facebook and Instagram, it's working because it's coming up on my feed, just to let you know. Your money's well spent, sir. I read the articles and I found it to be extremely helpful. There are some points, and I'm going through it and I'm going, I did that, I did this, I didn't do that. Maybe I should probably do that, right? Which was kind of cool. So I have my little scorecard when we're dealing with that. So some of the bullet points in that, and I thought something that was really, really awesome that you have in there, and it's so insightful, just understanding that your client, right, whether it be the insurance company or the attorney, is going through the same thing that you're going through, right? They don't know where their work is coming from. Like, we're all in this together, and have the grace when you're talking with somebody to understand they're in the same boat that you are, right? I thought that was really insightful. Very cool.
Mm-hmm. You're right about that. And, one of the lessons I learned in business was when I was 26 years old and just starting out, I thought, how remarkably smart am I going to be when I'm 50? Thinking that, I'll have everything figured out. Well, I turned 50 and it's like, I'm still kind of a dumbass. And, you look around and lawyers are the same way, leaders in insurance companies, corporate leaders, they're all scared to death of what's happening here. No one has quite figured this out.
Yeah, it's a brave new world. It's and I can tell you, like in New York, everything's amplified, right? Umpteenth power. It's we as we're recording this tonight, New York City's open for 2 days. And already people are just like, the masks are off, they're running around. It's like, hey, it's phase 1, folks. It's not, we're not there yet, but there's just that, sigh of relief. And then all the protesting on top of that, which is a whole nother issue that we're not going to get into right now. But that's feeding the fuel to the fire of unrest and uncomfortableness as far as getting back into business and things returning to the normal or the new normal, right? That's got to be part of the equation as well, the unrest that's been going on.
Yeah, and the advice that I give here, none of it is really terribly groundbreaking, but sometimes we just forget about the basics, the blocking and tackling. So this is the worst time in the world to not be talking to your clients. And our first reaction is, well, no one's calling me, I'm not going to call them. They'll call me when they need something.
Right. Yeah, big mistake, right? So engaging your clients, that's your first bullet point on that. And I thought that was really, really, really great, actually.
Yep.
That was like the first thing that I did before I started doing all the webinars, because that was the second thing I started doing, right, was the training. But the first thing was like, I'm just going to reach out to, touch base with my clients. I know that there's no work available. I know they're working from home. I know they don't have their files. but let's just shoot the breeze. And I ended up talking of cooking a lot with them because some of them do follow me on social media, and I like to cook, right? So that steak was awesome. How did you make that? So here I am, like I had these attorneys, like I'm giving them advice and teaching them like my styles of cooking meat, and they're sending me photos. Hey, like my kids love this. I'm a champ. Thank you, right? Completely unrelated to law or any of that, but I'm building relationships, right? So right, I thought that was a real good point, right? Engaging with your clients, and it's not too late. Now is the time to do it, right? If they're just getting ready to get back to work, like they're a week or two away from having to go into their office, this is a perfect time to do it. Send out your constant contact and make your phone calls and do what you need to do, right?
Right. And it can be as simple as just, and in the article, I give some examples of, how would you connect with the message to a lawyer is a little different than a message to an insurer or a corporate client.
Yeah, that was actually a good point too. You have different models there to follow when you're contacting people.
So it's not, it's not like you have to have, a big pitch ready. Sometimes it can just be, hey, I'm thinking of you. I hope everything's okay. Should anything come up, I want you to know that we're open, and if we can do it, we'll do it.
Right. And it's funny because you can sense the frustration in their voices too when you're talking to them, right? They don't want to be at home. They're sick of their kids too. They just want to go back to work, So the second point you have is connecting with your peers, which is another thing that I found myself doing, right? Let me call the folks that I know all around the country and say, hey, what's going on in New Orleans? What's going on in LA? Tell me what's going on in Detroit. I want to know, like, what's Chicago like? And just reaching out to the investigators I know all throughout the country and just touching base and saying, hey, this is what's going on in New York. What's going on by you? So I had a lot of those types of conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think sometimes we get, a little worked up about talking to competitors. I think that's probably a little overblown. But
it's
all of us
nonsense, right?
Yeah. But, we all have friends in other markets. And, you just never know. I've talked to some investigators, one in New England, who said, I'm just killing it. I couldn't be busier. He pivoted from doing all his work comp surveillance to just hammering certain channels on social media with domestic stuff. And it was just brilliant. He says, I don't like it, but I can turn it on and off.
You do what you have to do at these times, right?
And then he said, I was talking to someone in LA about it and they did the same thing. So, those are good examples of sharing what's working and what's not working.
Well, I'll tell you what's working now in New York. Anyone who does armed security, every company wants 2 armed guards, in front of their facility or the executives want them at their house. Like it's no joke. So the folks that do that up around here that I've talked to, I mean, they're soliciting people to come work for them. Like they have so much work, they can't handle it. They need armed guards and drivers and things like that. So that part of our industry is booming these days.
Mm-hmm. And if you remember too, Matt, maybe I think you'll remember this, but after the Great Recession, the mortgage crisis, there was a whole cottage industry that popped up around mortgage fraud. And, law firms and certain government agencies were saying, okay, run down this mortgage holder. Find out, see if they have their original app. And it was crazy. A friend of mine up in Michigan who made a fortune doing that for probably 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So in all types of crisis, there are opportunities.
Well, contact tracing now is the thing. I know in New York, we tried to get our association on board with that, but the governor had other plans on wanting to have more control with it. And Mike Bloomberg stepped in and, he's running the whole show on this stuff. But there are still investigators that are going through that Johns Hopkins program with the thought that, hey, I know I'm not going to make a lot of money on this, but it's something for me to do right now. And it's my way to help, in the situation. So like, socially for community, like this is my way of giving back, doing it. And, it's a natural, right? An investigator should be a contact tracer. Like we have the skills to do it correctly. So, there's a lot of that going on there too. So the third point in your article I thought was great too was don't stop investing in growth. So I want you to touch on that a little bit.
Well, one of the reactions that all of us have in times of crisis is, as business owners, is okay, no revenue's coming in. What do I cut? And you can cut with a chainsaw or a scalpel, and you have to be very careful. So there are certain things that you can cut that won't have that much of a material effect. But one of the things that I see, not just in our business, but in a lot of businesses, is the first thing that goes is the marketing budget. And while you might not want to be spending as much on marketing, you have to keep investing somewhere, because, when things get turned back on, and they're getting turned back on pretty quickly, if your pipeline is completely dry, you're going to have to spend now another month after everything gets turned back on trying to generate work.
Oh, here's the danger in that too, and I don't mean to jump in, but the danger in that is if we get a second wave, right? If there's, if this happens again and we're shut off now, you had this opportunity in this small window of 3 or 4 months of banging out business. Now everyone's at home again. So, there is that danger of that. So I think, you make a good point of investing in marketing and making sure that you're ready for the, or you're ready to handle the work or advertise that you're out to handle the work when it comes in.
Yeah. And, look, there's a lot of different forms that investing in your continued growth can be. One of them could be reaching out to the bar association and offering a webinar, getting in front of some virtual groups. You just got to stay out there. You can't stay buried with your head in the sand.
Right.
And that could be a fatal mistake. I'm afraid, for a lot of struggling PIs that were maybe not doing great to begin with, but we're entering a new normal now. And
it's true.
We need to.
I think you were also talking about pro bono work, right? Doing background checks for landlords, or just kind of paying it forward.
Yes.
For people for later on. I thought that was pretty insightful. Pretty cool too. So I think we kind of covered the fourth point a little bit, but you have here anticipating new and changing needs. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, right? The new normal, right, and things that are moving forward.
Yeah, and the point on that, Matt, it's almost going back to the very first point about talking to your clients, because they may tell you things that surprise you. Like, we're not going to be bringing back everyone to the office here. We're probably going to cut staff, so we're going to broker out more of our litigation support. Well, it'd be good to know that, wouldn't it? So, in addition to anticipating these new and changing needs, ask about these new changing needs. Customers will tell you if they need more from you.
Right.
They'll let you know, but you have to ask.
Sure. Especially those that do computers and setting up networks and security with networks. There's a real opportunity for that with so many people working from home now.
Oh, absolutely.
Being able to service that and making sure that there's, all that information is being protected the way it should be protected. So that's another opportunity for us. So the other thing you were talking about was addressing a budget, which I thought was really good, right? Going back and looking at your books and seeing, forecasting out for the rest of the year. What is that going to look like, and how am I going to survive? I thought was pretty insightful too. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of people don't do real formal budgeting, and if I'm working with someone with a relatively small agency, sometimes budgeting is kind of fruitless because there's just too many factors out there. But we can all look at between now and the end of the year, what assumptions can you make? And again, you have to be talking to your clients, because some are going to tell you, hey, we're done. We're not opening back up, or our work is not going to come back for a long time. So once you have pounded some stakes in the ground and you kind of know what's definitely going to be there, what might be there, and what is definitely not going to be there, start making some assumptions. Like, oh God, I think we'll bill another $200,000 this year. And how does that work out?
Right.
Who stays, who goes?
Time to get the calculator out and figure it out, right?
Absolutely. And if you have a really good accountant who understands the business, that could be helpful.
Right.
But man, there's so many different things that you can look at that can kind of ease the pain.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, if you're talking about doing business with attorneys, I know here in New York, they're talking about we're not going to have any trial by juries till January or February, right? So there goes all the subpoenas out the window.
Right.
There goes all this pre-trial work that needs to get done. If that's your bread and butter, then yeah, you should be talking to your clients and figuring out what am I going to do here. I know there's some of the guys I know, and I do a little bit myself too, is the juror research, right? We've got all this abilities to do backgrounds on jurors, and it's really cool, neat stuff. Well, if there's no juries happening, then what are we doing here? We're not selling too much. So yeah, I think just having that assumption of what the rest of the year is going to look like is something that's probably very prudent to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think one of the tough things coming up for a lot of people, Matt, is your biggest expenditures are rent, which you can oftentimes have a very difficult time unwinding from that. But the other big expenditures is our wages. And, these are times where it's so difficult to lay someone off. And the mistake a lot of people make is they just wait too long. And, they end up paying someone for the end of the payroll for months on end when you should have known that work is not coming back.
Don't be a hero, right? Yeah. And the thing is, the way they've set up with unemployment right now, I'm finding it may be hard to bring them back. I've had questions from people that work for me that say, okay, well, can you guarantee me full-time work?
Yep.
Not now, maybe in about 3 weeks, but not now. Well, I'm making more money on unemployment, so I think I'm just going to stay on unemployment. I was like, can you just shoot me an email then just saying you're refusing work, so when I get audited by the Department of Labor, I at least have a record of it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's tough. And look, I empathize with people. I've been through these situations before. It's really easy for you and I to sit here and say, cut wages. It's tough. It's really hard when these people have worked with you for a long time, but you can't forget that at the end of the day, it's a business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So the other thing you had talked about was knowing your insurance coverage and your banking covenants, which I thought was interesting. It was a good point, right? Really with the insurance policy of you, if you have that insurance coverage for business stoppage, I thought was really, really cool, right? So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, oftentimes when we buy insurance for the business, we tend to get the bare minimum. We don't read the policy. The agent typically doesn't really know what's included in there, not. It's all in the fine print. Two interesting things have happened. So we have first the pandemic, and that's certainly business interruption. Chances are extremely low that will be covered. But now with the civil unrest, if your building that you're in, your office is in, got looted or burned down, you may have coverage. And so it's really important that, and I learned this lesson many, many years ago, whenever you're dealing with an insurer, you never ask these kind of questions to the broker, the agent, the person who sold it to you. You always call the claims people, and then everything's got to be in writing. We're turning down the claim because of this.
Right.
And if you disagree with it, then you start fighting it. And insurers tend to, their first reaction, we all know this from being in the work comp space, the first reaction to everything is we're not paying.
Of course.
The second point then is with your bank, and a lot of our listeners have lines of credit. Your line of credit is always predicated on your revenue.
Right.
So if you're thinking, I haven't tapped my line of credit, that'll save me when I open the doors back up. Well, a month later, the bank's going to say, okay, you've tapped up your line of credit. Fill out this borrowing certificate. And your borrowing certificate is revenue minus 20%, minus anything over 90 days. And, you better have that much. And I think a lot of people don't know that.
Right.
So most people, if you have a line of credit, your banker well, just get in front of it.
Yeah, I think when you reach a certain size with your business, you almost have to have a line. If you don't have a line, then you got money stuffed in the sofa somewhere or under the bed somewhere because it's definitely part of that growth strategy. That kind of segues us into what you're doing, what the ultimate goal for Paul Jaeb is, and going forward here. That's one of the bullet points for you for your coaching service, right? And one of the things you offer are different strategies for growth for people's business, right? And you have different tracking programs and things that you use as well, right? marketing
Right.
solutions and troubleshooting and things like that. So you have a real formula to how you actually coach people. And hey, listen, you said it yourself. You've been doing this over 30 years. It sounds like you know what you're doing, right?
Well, the advantage I have, I don't claim to be any smarter than anyone else, but the advantage I have in this space is that, for probably 95% of all investigators out there, wherever they are in their journey, I've been there. And that's just because I was around a long time, and I grew it from, a really small enterprise to something big. So I have the advantage of just happen to see and go through a lot of different things. And that's really what I'm looking to impart with people. So we've kind of got two tracks, Matt, going forward. And if people keep their eye on AmericanPrivateInvestigator.com, we are putting out some webinars now. One of them is called Reboot Your Agency, which talks about, okay, how do we get out of this last 3-4 months here? And it's kind of what we just talked about here, but some specific strategies on rapidly recovering revenue, recalibrating your marketing, things like that. But the two kind of things I'm really excited about, we're going to starting a couple of different groups here. We're going to have cohorts of 10 investigators in a 13-week course where we just go through, 13 different things that you need to do as an agency owner. Some of them we've talked about here today. And this would be for people that are kind of still in that growth phase and they really want to make sure that they're building a really great business. The next group that we're going to be working with are people that are ready to consider getting out. And there's a couple strategies about how to get out of your business. You can simply turn it over to a family member. You can turn the lights off, or you can sell it. And each one of those things is a whole different path. And so we're going to be getting some groups together to be talking about that. And then I'm working with some private equity guys that are considering doing kind of a roll-up of the industry for, certain sectors.
Right.
But that's an opportunity to kind of learn, because I went through that too. It was very, very complicated selling a business my size.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, that's, how do you sleep at night?
Yeah, it was a lot of pressure. And again, I learned a lot through that process. So we're going to try to help a lot of these investigators who have great value tied up, but they just don't know how to get out. And, sometimes it's too late. It's like, God, I'm 70.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, like the nightmare that I have is shutting the lights off, right? You work your whole life and to walk away with nothing after you've put your, blood, sweat, and tears into it, to me is that's disturbing. Yeah. That is a nightmare for me.
And one of the things we talk about, Matt, is, that you should always be looking. There's a very simple calculation that gives you a general idea of what your agency is worth. And that's something you should be looking at on a really regular basis. You just fill in these 5 boxes and kind of here's where it's at. And a lot of guys, I find it 2 different ways. They're either stunned at how little they're worth or they're stunned at how much they're worth. There's very little in the middle. Because most business owners, if you talk to business brokers, will say every single business owner thinks their business is worth vastly more,
of course,
than what it's actually worth. Yeah. And I fell into that category too. So I had to, had my bubble burst, and then I had to, kind of reevaluate and take another year to straighten some things out. So we're really excited about these new offerings.
Yeah, I love the idea of getting this group of people together. That are kind of in the same boat as far as their experience goes, and helping one another just really kickstart and push forward and making their operation run better. Because what works for somebody, may not have been considered by somebody else. And to be able to have those conversations and then having a third or fourth person say, "Yeah, that's a good idea," or "Yes, I did this," or never thought about doing that. Like, that excites me. I think that's something that's not out there, and I think it's really, really cool to be able to create that group.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You find out, most of these things that have happened to us in the last 20 years, 9/11 was super sudden. Even the Great Recession, that fateful day in October where the floor fell out, and then with the pandemic, preceding all these things were pretty frothy times. So a lot of us got a little, kind of lazy. Work was just rolling in. You didn't have to work that hard for it. And then all of a sudden, when something like this happens, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm not doing the basic stuff. I've lost sight of the blocking and tackling. And, there are times to work in the business and there are times to work on the business. And I think that latter thing is what we often forget, because every time you go to a conference, 9 out of 10 tracks are about, the mechanics of being a PI.
Sure.
And not about being a business owner. And I think that's troublesome.
Yeah. And one of the most valuable things is the relationships that you build there. Like sitting at your table and eating your lunch by yourself is, you're not getting your money's worth by doing that, right? You should be, hanging out and talking to people and just understanding what their business is and how they operate and do things.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so we're going to wind down here in a little bit. This was great. I really, I was so looking forward to this conversation because it's literally been 9 months since I wanted to chat with you. I respect the heck out of you, and you just your experience and the things you bring to the table are really, really awesome. So tell folks how they can get a hold of you.
Sure, you can visit AmericanPrivateInvestigator.com. Gives all the information on our upcoming events. You can also download the survival guide that Matt and I were just talking about. I'm also on Facebook, and we put a lot of posting content out on Facebook, and just look up at American Private Investigator. You can sign up and get into our system, and we'll send you things directly as to what's happening.
Yeah, we're going to have all that information in the show notes too. So, hey, Paul, thank you so much for this time. It's been great. I'm excited by these new projects. I know folks have been asking, I see it, like, hey, when are you coming back with the podcast? So hopefully that's in the mix as well. Listen, my show is usually about 35 to 40 minutes. They're 24 hours in the day. So I encourage all good podcasting to get out there, right? I don't need to hog everybody. So I don't know if that's in your plans, but it's definitely something that would be welcomed if you're doing it by more than just me. I'm not the only fanboy out there.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I really appreciate it, Matt. I am a big fan of yours too, and I love the program. It's I think you're doing a great job, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. All right, so I think we're gonna wrap it up here. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week on the next show. Take care, everybody.
Now, how great was it to hear Paul Jaeb in the podcast format again? We want to thank him for his time, and we encourage you to check out the webinar this Wednesday at 10 a.m. It's free to attend. Check the show notes for more info. We also want to thank Crosstrack, Scope Now, and the Investigators-Toolbox.com for sponsoring this show. Please, folks, check out their site and consider using their services. Now, make sure you use code PIP20 for additional savings. Hey, next week, we welcome Andrea Orozco from Advanced Professional Investigations. Please be sure to give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and share the show with your friends. Have a great week, stay safe, and thanks for tuning into PI Perspectives.